Hello, as always, Masha tells you stories and welcomes you to the 13th episode of the podcast Film Grazia Artis, or just Film if shortly. Here I share tales that inspire and reveal unique experiences of creators, makers and lovers of all kinds. I hope you find this program interesting and encouraging, whether you practice art or enjoy learning about other people's creativity, backgrounds, and their resistance to youth militarization. Throughout the 20th century, armed conflicts became increasingly frequent worldwide. This rise in warfare has left a devastating impact, creating a lasting legacy that continues into the 21st century, where political tensions and hostilities remain deeply rooted in many regions. Children and young people have always played a role in various conflicts, from ancient times to the present day. The use of childhood for military manipulation is a troubling global phenomenon. This practice, whether through direct conscription, propaganda, militarized education, or symbolic use in parades and media, arises from a mix of political, psychological, cultural, and ideological motives. Children are psychologically malleable, more impressionable, and obedient than adults. Authoritarian regimes exploit their developing sense of identity and loyalty, training them before they develop critical thinking. Adolescents are taught to see violence as normal, enemies as inhuman, and obedience as a virtue. Militarization instills an us versus them worldview, often rooted in nationalism or ideological superiority. When children are taught to idealize soldiers, regarding violence as a heroic act, they become susceptible to xenophobia, intolerance, and radicalization. This is particularly evident in extremist movements where child participants are not only indoctrinated but deployed as violent actors. Youth militarization can cause significant psychological trauma, particularly when children are exposed to combat roles, weapons, or violence. According to a 2024 report by War Children International Organization, children recruited into armed conflict, voluntarily or forcibly, are at high risk of developing post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and anxiety. These outcomes persist even when military involvement is symbolic or ceremonial in nature. A 2023 UNICEF study on youth parades in Southeast Asia found that early exposure to military rituals and uniforms leads to emotional desensitization and fear, distorting a child's sense of safety and belonging. The militarization of children is not only harmful, it is illegal. The United Nations Convention on Rights of the Child explicitly prohibits the recruitment or use of children under the age of 18 in hostilities. Yet, violations continue in conflict zones like Yemen, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Syria, Palestine, and Iran. Even outside of active war zones, youth are often subtly militarized through school cadet programs, military training camps, and glorification of war in textbooks and films. These practices, while not always illegal, violate the spirit of the United Nations Convention by prioritizing militaristic values over children's rights to education, play, and freedom of thought. Youth militarization erodes democratic citizenship. It discourages critical thinking, decent and non-violent civic engagement. When education systems promote blind loyalty to military institutions, they limit young people's ability to question authority, empathize with others, and imagine a peaceful future. Some may wonder if there is a way for society to deal with this problem. Is there anything that can be done about this? Not always and not everywhere, but there is some soft power that can slightly cause an effect through a rather simple though profound way of emotional communication and influence. Many philosophers, critical theorists, and scholars have interrogated this issue, either directly or through broader critiques of power, militarism, and the construction of childhood. In the 20th century and today, when it has already been said and written so much on violence and human psychology, children continue to get involved in war, which deprives them in their right to play, explore, and imagine, which impacts healthy psychological development. Voices appeal to the wild public, criticizing this issue, but it seems that they're just vox clamantis in deserto. Judith Butler is among the modern scholars, the author of the work In Frames of War, When is Life Grievable?, where she discusses how drivability and vulnerability are manipulated in the politics of war. She argues that some lives are made to seem more expendable than others, including children, especially in marginalized regions. Militaries exploit children's visibility to justify or obscure violence, legitimizing injustice. Cynthia Enloe is leading feminist political theorist and internationally respected scholar, known for her critical work on militarism, nationalism, and gender politics. Her research uncovers how seemingly private or everyday spaces, such as families, schools, or beauty salons, are deeply engaged with global system of power, especially in times of war and political conflict. In her analysis, Enloe shows how both women and children are used symbolically to strengthen nationalist agendas. Children are used as symbols of the nation's future to justify war. There are common slogans like, "We fight to protect our children," who, being dressed in military uniforms in parades and schools, instill loyalty and obedience from a young age. They represent pure innocent victims, which is weaponized to mobilize support for state policies or military action. Women are often framed as mothers, wives, and supporters of soldiers, reinforcing traditional gender roles, but also females are used to justify military action, which claims like, "We must protect our women from the enemy." In this way, women become the focus of state propaganda, urged to support war efforts by encouraging their sons or husband to enlist and by helping sustain morale on the home front. Thinking on that again and again, we can come up with some questions. Who benefits when a child is taught to salute a flag? What ideologies are embedded in children's school books, uniforms, or songs? Why are boys trained for war while girls are trained to support it? Answers may challenge the way we view global politics, not as neutral or rational systems, but as deeply gendered and emotionally charged, when militarism invades the domestic sphere just as much as it does the battlefield. If we observe it more attentively, we can find out that patriotism often disguises control, especially of women and children, while feminist curiosity is a powerful tool for dismantling oppressive narratives and exposing hidden power structures. Is there anything that can really help to save childhood? This is a tricky question, especially if the threat looms over one who is not protected. A person who cannot defend oneself always comes to someone who can, such as parenting figure, seeking help and shelter, choosing a soft power over a harsh one. Soft power alludes to female archetypal figure, like mother, caregiver, and healer found in mythology, literature, and oral traditions, where women become protectors, the one who mends wounds and opposes the positive spirit to the devastating power of war. Mending wounds allude to sewing and weaving, which typically represent the form of reconstructing, emotional labor, comfort, and peace-building. Since textiles are intimate, tactile, historically linked to domestic life, and thus inherently child-associated, it reclaims softness to confront harsh reality that transforms kids into warriors, wrapping war relics softly into blankets, forming gentle forms of remembrance, reclaiming agency and humanity for victims, especially for children. Artists highlight the importance of questioning youth indoctrination through art, because art reaches where policy, reports, and news often cannot. They touch the emotional, cultural, and moral consciousness of society. The issue of children and youth militarization is often hidden behind war play, with toy weapons, uniforms, parades, and bright slogans. If a person breaks through these symbols and shows the real human cost, questioning the normalization of such military trends and fashions, asking viewers what they've come to accept as normal, it might cause resonance without violential effect. Thus, Barb Hunt from Canada transforms military camouflage uniforms into soft sculptures like worn maternity camouflage pants with an image of an embryo, camouflage baby slippers, and camouflage flowers. By using caring fibers items to mimic military attributes or instruments of war, Barb Hunt criticized the normalization of violence in society, highlighting how these tools harm children first. Many female artists, particularly in areas affected by conflict, such as the RPRist of Chile or embroidery groups in Sri Lanka, turns to textiles, thread, and yarn as powerful non-verbal tools. Through these materials, they process trauma, honor those they've lost, and pass down stories across generations using craft to express grief, resilience, and hope. One artist who embraced this simple yet powerful medium is Marianne Jørgensen from Denmark. Alongside a group of volunteers, she knitted a vivid pink cover for a military tank, which she placed over a real World War II-era tank outside the National Museum of Contemporary Art in Copenhagen. Marianne explained her choice, saying, "Pink is a color associated with softness, femininity, and vulnerability. Everything a tank is not." Her aim was both political and symbolic. She began the project as a direct protest against Denmark's role in the Iraq War, while also seeking to shield children from fear and authoritarianism, common features in societies shaped by masculine ideas of power, weaponry, and domination. The feminine figure there is always underestimated, but it inverts expectations, even where devastating powers shape young minds. A female voice says no to propaganda-infused militarism, like the same cult work by Gülsün Karamustafa, now a renowned Turkish visual artist and political prisoner in the past. She is widely recognized for her politically charged work that tackles themes such as gender, migration, memory, exile, and the consequences of modernization and militarization in Turkey. One of the most profound works of such kind is her project No, which refers to her broader body of work that is deeply rooted in dismantling the structures that project violence onto the young. She highlights how society harnesses youth for state narratives of heroism and sacrifice. No continues the resistance, metaphorically saying no to indoctrinating children and repurposing childhood memories. A woman's figure always represents softness, and such softness is found in all the works I mentioned today. Whether they are made of fibers and threads or thoughts which wrap our minds to challenge militarism and reclaim nurturing to be a humanitarian mission. Mothers do not give life to feed the machine of war. They give life to be cherished, nurtured, and lived. In a world where youth are too often drawn into the machinery of war, trained, uniformed, and ideologically shaped to serve systems of violence, the female figure emerges as a profound symbol of resistance. Whether as mother, protector, philosopher, or artist, she embodies the values that stand in stark contrast to militarization, care over control, creation over destruction, and the memory over erasure. Through nurturing hands, thoughtful questioning, and acts of artistic defiance, she approaches childhood as a sacred space of growth, not a battleground of ideologies. Her presence in this context is not passive or ornamental. It is political, transformative, and essential. She mourns the losses, heals the wounds, and fiercely protects the possibility of peace. In opposing the militarization of youth, the female figure does more than resist. She reclaims the future. Just imagine a world without war. No sirens, no uniforms, no walls drawn in fear. The skies are quiet, not because of silence, but because there is no more screaming metal, only birdsong and wind in the trees. Children walk to school without dread. They carry books, not burdens. Their games are free of ranks and commons, only laughter, wild and whole. Imagine cities where soldiers have become healers, where tanks have disappeared, and their places took playgrounds, and where uniforms are stitched into quilts, retelling not glory, but the story of a difficult lesson and peace reclaimed. The grief, the fear, the division, all dissolving into a collective breath of relief. This is not a dream, it is a possibility, held in every heart that dares to imagine a world rebuilt not by power, but by compassion. Carry that vision like a flame, and I will be back soon.